Okay. Hi, nice to meet you.
You too. Nice to see you. Thank you very much for rescheduling.
No, of course, you're so welcome. How couldn't we? How's your day been?
It's good. It's my son's birthday, so I've spent the day making a cake so far.
I
It's
love.
cooling.
What kind of cake is it?
It's a chocolate mousse cake. He really wanted chocolate. I
Lovely.
don't think that I'm going to win Star Baker for it, but we're doing our best.
Yeah. Do you plan on decorating it and everything?
Yes. I lack finesse, so we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be beautiful no matter what it looks like. It's the thought that counts, right?
Well, it has to taste good. As long
Right.
as the flavors are whatever, beautifully. I've been watching a lot of Bake Off and I just keep running through Paul Hollywood terms in my head. As long as the cakes have not concertinaed and it's simple but effective.
Yeah, exactly. It's all you need. And then you can get yourself an apron and a wooden spoon and call it a day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. So I would first off like to say I've finished Gifted and Talented. Amazing. I
Thank
loved
you.
it.
Thank you
It
for
was
reading.
good. And of course. I'm sure I'll dive into all the questions, but yeah, I got so much to say about it and I can't wait to talk to you about it. For everyone watching, if you click on the three little dots, there's like a grid of 9 dots. There's a Q&A function where you'll be able to ask some questions, and yeah, we'll get them answered. So yeah, should we get started?
Sure. Yes.
Perfect. First of all, our book clubs have been reading Alone with You in the Ether,
Yes.
which we've all loved, and I think it's so different to a lot of your work. Yeah, I just wanted to think, how would you describe it to someone who hasn't read it yet? I think it's quite a hard one to pinpoint.
It is. It's a strange one too because of how it's had to be folded into publishing, because it is like I don't allow my publishers to call it contemporary romance. I
Yeah.
don't believe that it is a romance novel by the standards of genre romance, because I think romance has its own, like, it has a pace, it has an established pace. Like, romance readers know the rate at which you move through the story. There's something familiar about it. That's what's so wonderful about the romance genre, is that you fall in love over and over again in a way that feels familiar. And it does not have that. It's not like a safe reading experience in that there's a lot of emotional turbulence. It's also like, it's really more about, it is about how to love another person if you feel that you are broken. I think that I've sort of collected over time just variety of quotes that people have said about it that I think helps me explain what the book is to other people. Because I think technically when I wrote it, it was more of something that I had to work through. Like it was like, once I had gone through the process of being diagnosed with bipolar and dropping out of law school and starting to write and starting to feel like maybe the best version of my brain is a creative version, and to also accept that like that I could be, that I didn't have to constantly treat love as some sort of transaction, or to constantly feel like I had to work to be worthy of it. That it was enough to just love and be loved, and that was like fine, like, like it's cool.
Yeah.
So I wanted to write, it was a few things when I was writing it. I wanted to write the experience of being inside of a mental disorder, which is difficult to do in book form. I think there are occasionally, you can do things with cinematography, I think, that can mimic the feeling. But in terms of just like reading the story, especially if you're not familiar with the experience, that's the reason for the very stylistic differences between the various parts. So people usually ask me about the narrators in part 1, and that's my way of writing. Like, my experience with depression is a sort of disinterest in yourself and your life, and this just feeling of distance between all these things that you feel like you just can't touch emotionally, that they're just dangerous to you. There's a sort of fatigue going through life. And so my way of expressing that was Regan and Aldo were never going to tell you anything about their emotions or their lives or any, like they are not interested in doing that. So they have these narrators step in, and the narrators, like, depending on how closely you read them, those narrators represent different aspects of themselves. And so that was my way of approaching depression. And then, like, later in the book, we start to go into mania, and there's this sort of very rhythmic feeling of like a pace that's escalating. Like, you can feel that Regan's heart is moving too fast. Like, her thoughts are moving too fast. So I think that in terms of what I was trying to accomplish, I was trying to write how to be inside of a mood disorder, but also to write a love story where some people have said that if you've ever felt unworthy of love, then this is the book to read. And another thing that I have really enjoyed is someone recently said that they said, if this book speaks to you, then I hope that it helps you understand something about yourself. And if it doesn't, then I hope it helps you understand something about me, which I thought was you know, part of the reason for writing it, I guess. I think initially when I wrote it, there was a time when it was self-published, and I did not necessarily feel that this was like this was not, I did not want it to be pitched for everyone, you know. With traditional publishing's job is to sell books.
Yeah.
And so they want to find like the largest group of people that a story might appeal to. And I was like, I think that's very dangerous to do here, because I think there's a lot of people who go to romance looking for like a healthy romance and looking for like the experience that I mentioned earlier. And instead, what I'm giving them is 1 year of a very turbulent, slightly codependent love story that, like, theoretically will get better over time, but I'm leaving that to you to imagine. I'm not explaining how they're going to live the rest of their lives. And also because these are neurodivergent, mentally ill characters. This is like the concept of health is kind of the point. So I think there was always this, I was a little bit hesitant to traditionally publish it initially. I actually was not happy to learn that it had gone viral when it was self-published. I was like, this is just not a book for everyone. It's very scary. Like, the thought, you know, when I guess I have not said this yet, if anyone is not familiar with me, I self-published my books not with the intention to make a living that way, but just because any book that I wrote and thought, you know, well, I don't want this to die on my hard drive. I want someone to read it. I want the right person to read it. But like, I'm not too worried about, like,
that's such a funny concept to me, where they wanted to go viral.
Yeah. So I would self-publish books that would then theoretically only be read by people who are very accustomed to me, my style, my like habit of introspection. And then it started to like breach containment, because the Atlas 6 went viral first. Technically, I wrote Alone with You in the Ether first, and then I wrote the Atlas 6. And then after I wrote the Atlas 6, because I had done so much with theoretical physics, then I went back to Alone with You in the Ether and like fleshed out the time travel parts. And so those were kind of like, they were written at very similar times, even though the Atlas 6 was published first. Anyway, the Atlas 6 went viral, and then people started to find Alone with You in the Ether, and then Alone with You in the Ether went viral. And that was a very uncomfortable feeling for me, because I was like, this is not meant for everyone. Like, there's some people that I just want to take that book back from. Like, just give me that back. It's not for you.
I think that's what's so refreshing about it, is that it showcases romance in a different way. It shows like almost real romance.
Yeah, it's a love story. That was, I'm glad that we were able to keep that sort of tagline for the the traditionally published version. And I also like, I think of it as speculative, in that like it is a fantasy, it's a love story written by a fantasy author that does not have any actual fantasy in it, but you're meant, like, while you're reading, you're meant to sort of feel like at any moment they could travel in time, like that those possibilities, the sort of wonder of a fantastical world are present, even though we're just in Chicago.
Oh, I love that. I think I know within the club itself, the book club in particular that I hosted, we ended up going into, we talked about the book, of course, but then we ended up going into, people were talking about their personal lives and how they felt that they saw themselves in a certain aspect of a character, and how they could really relate to this aspect and stuff like that. And I think it's so important, especially in, because I don't think you get many traditionally published books that actually talk about like that side of mental illness. Usually kind of painted over with a kind of gloss that you have to really take through to kind of dig through. But yeah, it was really nice to see it talked about so openly without any, I don't want to say like rose tinted lenses, but in a certain way it was very truthful, very honest, and brutal in parts. And I think it was just like very refreshing again to read.
I think it helps, you know, the rose tinted element that I am like, I have a happy marriage. I did find myself, you know, comfortable and safe in love. So to write from the perspective of it does work out, I think does kind of lend it that feeling of like, I wanted to be really honest about all the parts that just pull right up to the edge of self-harm, you know, like the harmful thoughts, the intrusive voices, everything telling you that you're not good enough, that you don't deserve things, that like, I think there's one part that I always think about because it does still ring true for me, the bit about like, what if I'm always the sick one? What if I'm always the one that's trying really, really hard just to be normal, just to exist? And I think that's something what Alone with You in the Ether has in common with Gifted and Talented for me is that sort of same feeling of like, what if I'm never good enough? Except that Alone with You in the Ether is about a love story, so about a romantic relationship, and Gifted and Talented, that element is about motherhood. And it's just like, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that if I felt that way about being someone's partner, I obviously also feel that way to an even bigger extent about being someone's mother. So I think that I would like to think that there is a real strength creatively to being able to just sort of open a vein and bleed on the page like that. I mean, I think that sometimes it can be like, I think you're right that this is not something that's very common in traditional publishing. And when I queried this initial manuscript, it was tamer. It would like, it didn't take so many experimental swings. And publishing, in terms of agents that I sent it to, were broadly uninterested. There was a lot of like, I can't relate to these characters. You know, I don't think that there's a market for this, or I have this other mental health book. I think that there is this sense that if a mental illness book is going to sell, it either has to be like about trauma, or it has to be like really uplifting, like I actually really like this book, Happiness for Beginners, but you know, like that, like it has, it's supposed to have a certain, it's either a little life or Happiness for Beginners, I think is like the approaches.
Kind of stable element to it that has a like,
right. And so I think there is probably a good chance that if it had not gone viral, if it were not functionally crowdsourced, and that there was already like, you know, publishing loves things that are a sure deal. So if there weren't already people who had connected to it, I am not sure that it could have been traditionally published as it was written. So I am, you know, enormously grateful that it is available to people. It is very, again, it shouldn't be available to everyone, and yet it has to be. Like, this is the compromise.
I think that's so interesting, isn't it? Where it's like agents saying, "Oh, I don't find any of these people relatable." And it's like, well, that's kind of the point, because it's not for you.
Yeah, I know that when I would get that response, I'd be like, well, like, good for you. Congratulations on your mental stability. There are also definitely other people that will finish reading it and they'll be like, girl, are you okay? Like, no, clearly not.
That's why the book is here.
Yeah.
Did it ever feel
looking
like
at the evidence.
Did it kind of feel like a love letter to yourself in a way?
I mean, it is far more a love letter to my spouse than to me. The dedication, to the old you from the old me is a reference to him. Although I do love that like readers have interpreted it as being for them. I think that's also valid. But yeah, it's sort of like looking back on a very tumultuous period in my life and reinterpreting none of the events, none of the care, like we are not them. Nothing that happened in the book happened to us, but sort of the feeling of coming to terms with how can I do this? Like,
Yeah.
how can I prepare for the kind of life that I want? Part of the reason that I dropped out of law school, I mean, this is very specific to the American justice system, but there were lots of, it was very difficult to, it's very difficult to have a mental disorder and sort of have difficulty occasionally processing emotions, especially bipolar. Essentially what happens is that like you experience something and like a trigger goes off in your brain, but maybe the wrong emotion follows. Like there's just like a little like mistrigger. And so, you know, sometimes a good thing could happen and I'll be depressed, or I don't know, anything could happen. And so carrying the like emotional labor of working in the criminal justice system specifically was like, it took a while for me to recognize this is not possible for me to do. Or I just, it was not going to work for me. I was not able to carry all of that. And then I also was starting to realize that I had gone through life up to that point, just sort of aiming for the next achievable thing, like that what's the next achievement, what's the next accomplishment, and that's not a great way to live, right? Because eventually you have to be happy with what you have, and eventually you have to be happy with who you are, and you have to be able to sit with yourself and kind of like yes, the inner space. And so I think that's what my husband did for me, that what meeting him did for me was make me realize like I cannot just keep moving forward without addressing all the things that feel wrong with me. So I think the truest and the most difficult to explain aspect of love in that way was I don't want to make my problems your problem. But maybe my problems are not as big a problem as I think they are. Or like maybe maybe just because it feels wrong or difficult does not mean that there's not some magic to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so interesting, especially having had a diagnosis. And I feel like especially for mental health disorders and the ways I've lost track of what I'm saying. I'm so sorry. I think it's so interesting as a woman to get a solid diagnosis is such a difficult process. Do you think like having the diagnosis put a different lens on it? Did it feel like a weight off your shoulders, or did it feel like it added to it or anything?
I remember being on the bus after the diagnosis and turning over the word bipolar in my head, or I was turning over the word mania and maniac, and just sort of pondering like, what does this mean when applied to me? And yeah, manic. I think I was just like, I remember just sitting on the bus and just like playing with the word and just thinking like, how can that be? And how am I ever supposed to be normal? And you know, I think that at this point in my life, we're looking at like over 10 years since I was diagnosed, and I think I've had this feeling different times. I've had it dealing with motherhood. I've had it just getting older. I've recently had the experience of like, I looked at my face. I should add, I live in LA, so it is very, very easy to get anything facial done. They're everywhere, you know, like I could get Botox, I could throw a rock and like find a place to get Botox and whatever. And I think my relationship with aging is that I didn't work that hard at like preventative stuff. Like if we look at the beauty industry and blah blah, like I was not too concerned with it because I looked very young for a very long time, like too young. Like I would get carded for alcohol like well into my 20s. And I actually once got carded for a rated R movie, which you have to be 17 to see, when I was like in my late 20s. So I did not worry about that sort of thing. But after I got pregnant, you know, you're with pregnancy, with motherhood, your whole body changes, and just everything was unrecognizable. And like all of a sudden I had wrinkles, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, are those crow's feet? Like now I have crow's feet, good God. And so I think I had to sort of look around at my world and be like, what do I want? What do I want my relationship to be? And I think that part of what I came to understand is that I think I was afraid of losing my youth, or that like maybe my youth was part of what was keeping me valuable to some extent.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a myth that I've had to grapple with. I think I'm like on the other side of it now, of being like, actually, I don't think anything was better when I was younger. I don't think that I was more beautiful, really, or I didn't feel like I was. Like, I actually feel better about myself now. So anything that I thought was lost, any sort of like desirability element or whatever, like that was just a myth to begin with.
Yeah.
And anyway, so what I'm saying is I feel like part of the process of going through life is having these constant like checkpoints of, what does this really mean for me? What does how much of what I'm experiencing, or how much of what I'm afraid of is just a myth that's been created for me. And I think in that sense, health, mental health as defined by mental health as incorrectly defined as the absence of mental illness is a myth, right? Like there is no such thing as someone who's going about the world just like perfectly healthy. And I think it's more of like, how much of ourselves are we able to take accountability for, and how much do we give ourselves and others grace? And I think that was the part that I'd always underestimated. It was kind of always this feeling of like, I have to be good, I have to be faultless, or I will never be loved, or I will never be lovable. And I think to stop thinking of life that way, of love that way, of this thing that I had to be good enough for, and to just accept that I could be loved for who I actually am, you know, pending accountability, etc. That was, it was something that I was only able to write about after I had gone through it. Alone with You in the Ether is kind of a time capsule of like what I was able to talk about at that time. I think it is, I'm technically on contract for another book in the style of Alone with You in the Ether. And I will be honest with you that I've been putting it off for a long time, because it's like, how do I write that book again? I could never. It was so specific to a period in my life, and a period of just a very brief period of time where I was able to kind of look at it, have the freshness of memory, but still be on the other side. So yeah, I am still writing that other book. I am actually writing it now, but I highly doubt it's going to read like Alone with You in the Ether, you know, like it's going to read like Alone with You in the Ether as written by an older version of that person.
It doesn't have that like closer connection to it.
It's probably not going to have that element of danger. You know, there's various points throughout the book where it's like, whoa, Regan, like it reminded me of I feel that 1989 Taylor's version, like the additional songs, are very closely tied to Alone with You in the Ether. The thing about in the one song, Is It Over Now, when she says about like she thinks about jumping off a building just to get his attention, like I think that word for word that happens in Alone with You in the Ether. So it's something that's very closely tied to youth. It's closely tied to the sort of like the expectation that love should be devastating. And I think that like that danger is something that it would be hard for me to write again, because I'm not that young anymore.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, isn't it? Because I feel like adulthood is, in a way, you learn that adulthood is just a series of both learning and unlearning things. You learn things and then you go, no, that's not quite right, and then you learn that and then you go, actually no, that wasn't right either. So it doesn't stop.
No, it doesn't.
Which is frustrating, but also keeps things fresh, you know. I suppose. Anyway.
Yes, we wouldn't like to just sit there on our laurels learning nothing. We know it all.
Yeah. I am. What underwent the most? Did anything specifically undergo a huge change between? I know you said that you wrote it before Atlas 6 and then going back to it. Was there anything aside from the time elements that underwent a process of change?
So the first version of Alone with the Ether was very similar, except that I was trying to, in order to be more marketable, I was trying to achieve something that was more literary, a little bit more highbrow. So less of the narrators did not exist, less of the intensity to the mania. I think I was aiming for like Call Me by Your Name kind of situation, which is another book that is not a romance because it can't be. It doesn't end with a happy ending and is more about the beauty of the writing. So I was trying to write lyrically and not make the mental illness the point. And then I got the responses like, I can't relate to these characters, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, if you can't relate to the soft version of these characters, the like blurred edge of them, then like this is not for traditional publishing. So I think at that point, once it was not, agents didn't like it, then I wrote the Atlas 6. I decided I was not going to query the Atlas 6 because I did not believe that it would do well in a query letter because it sounds sort of derivative. Like it could, I mean, I think this is true that like it has been comped to so many things over time that I was like, I don't think this will work for traditional publishing. So I wrote the Atlas 6. I self-published it as soon as it was done. Then I went back to Alone with You in the Ether. Then I looked more specifically at the time travel thing. I was trying to explain the hexagonal theory in a way that felt right. So I did a little bit more research on light cones and whatnot. It's funny how much goes into the thought process of a book that in the pages is only like a paragraph.
Yeah.
Like no one actually cares about how this would work. And then I self-published that. I think I self-published the Atlas 6 at the end of January, and I self-published Alone with You in the Ether in June. So I couldn't tell you specifically what I changed. I just know that I was like, you know what, if I'm going to do this for just like me and my closest pals, then I'm just going to make this feel exactly how I think it feels to exist as I exist. So yeah, certainly the narrators were added in after that. But then from between self-publishing and traditional publishing, nothing changed because that was part of my negotiation. I was like, I'm not open to editorial feedback on this book. Like, I don't want to hear you say you can't relate to these characters. I don't want to know if the pacing is off. Like, I don't care. This is a time capsule of what needed to be said to me probably at the time. And like, you can have it if you want, but I'm not touching it.
Yeah, I think that's so fair. I with Regan and Aldo, they're both obviously they complement each other and they're very much such opposites to each other. Did you have fun either with them or their narrator doing one or the other?
I mean, they're both. I would be hard pressed to call any of this process fun.
Well, yes.
Some things are fun. Some books are very fun. Gifted and Talented was very fun. Alone with You in the Ether was a real, like, I mean, I have almost no memory of the process. What happened, I remember that I woke up one morning and Aldo was in my head. Like the opening scene of the book, he was just sitting on a bench, fake smoking, and I was like, I have a sense for who he is. But I don't think he belongs in anything I'm currently working on. And I remember telling my therapist, like, he's just been sitting in there for like a week. And this is a problem. And she's like, why is it a problem? And I was like, because I'm supposed to be working on something marketable. And I could tell that he's not. Like, I can tell that the story he's part of is not something that is going to get me what I'm working for. Because basically, my husband and I have taken turns changing careers. And so when I decided, like, I want to give it a go, this writing thing, which is like a crazy, crazy, crazy gamble because you have no control over the pace of a creative career. You have no idea if and when it's ever going to pay you money, if you can ever survive on what you make. But I was like, I really want some time to just like try to do this, try to write something and get a contract and like, you know, he had just become a teacher at the time, and we, like, you know, we can live off a teacher's salary, just the two of us in a tiny apartment, we'll be fine. So I had like a limited time span of just like, I'm going to put literally everything I have into trying to get somewhere with this, knowing that there is an end date. Like at some point I can write forever, but I'll probably have to get a job. Like, so, gosh, where was I going with that? Well, where was I going with that? What was the question? I have completely lost it. I think oh yeah, so it was just like right. So I was very irritated by the presence of a story that needed to be written that was not going to take me closer to what I felt like I needed to get. So I was upset that Aldo was in my head, and like obviously I have learned at this point that like if a character lives in your head, you need to write that, because nothing else is going to come out. It's going to be like, I don't know, squeezing toothpaste out of a clogged tube. It's just not going to happen because he's in the way blocking it. And then like I think a week later, like Regan sat upright in bed, and I was like, she's in his story, and sat down to write it. And because it's quite a short book for me, I think I wrote it very quickly. Like that was probably a few weeks of writing. And then so I don't really have any memory of the actual process of writing it. I think I do remember when I was writing Regan's the part when she has like just really become manic at the point when she starts to paint again. And you can feel like her heart beating faster, her thoughts are less coherent. And I listened to the same song probably like 30 times over and over. It was in the Four Seasons suite, and I just kept listening to it over and over, and specifically the acceleration and just the feeling of her like gathering all her stuff and like running down the stairs and like getting into it. And that was something I remember was, again, not fun, but memorable, I think, as part of the process. I guess it was interesting to decide who the narrators should be, because to me they all have reasons. I do really think that if an adaptation of this were to ever get made, it would be really great if the guy who played Nick Miller on New Girl played the Chicago like Dalbert's character. I think that would be really important to me.
That's your one thing going into it. Like, okay, we can make a TV show.
You know, his little, I'm from Chicago. Like, that's what I
think that's perfect. I am with writing the books and going through the self-published route. How was it when everything did just kind of blow up and get as popular it has gotten?
This is another one that like I wish I had a better answer for, but I was like, when the Atlas 6 went viral, when it initially went viral on Twitter, and I was very, very pregnant, and everybody's first instinct was to pirate the book, and I was like, please don't steal from me, I'm so pregnant. Like that was the only thing I had to offer, was like, please, I don't have time to cry today. And then I was in the hospital giving birth when it went viral on TikTok. And I know this because my husband was looking at my self-publishing sales, and he was like, whoa, this is really spiked. And I was like, I'm actually physically right now in labor. Now's
not the time.
I'm not thinking about this. Yeah, I only knew afterward because someone reached out to me on Tumblr, which is where you can actually find me, and told me that it had gone viral on TikTok, and I was like, okay, whatever. But my intention had always been to traditionally publish. So when there was interest, or when it looked like the Atlas 6 was viable, we're talking about a different market. I think at this point, traditional publishing has been a lot better at tracking like when a self-published book has value, and they also understand that there is money to be made in the conversion from self-publishing to traditional publishing. But at the time that this happened to me, it was not as common. So when this happened, it would either, because of the legalities of like transferring the copyright, or well, not the legal, it's easier to take either a self-published book that has not had much traction and you can just pull it quietly and not many people have it, or it's really worth it when the book has sold approximately 10,000 copies, which is what my agent called the 50 Shades of Grey number. That's how many 50 Shades of Grey had sold as a self-published book before it got picked up. And she was like, so if you hit 10,000, call me. And I was like, that's hilarious. That's never going to happen. That's never going to happen. Like, I'm not on TikTok. I'm not doing anything. I am at that point, you know, I've just given birth. Like, it's not going to happen. And then it happens, in July. So my son was born in May, today. And and it went viral in July, or like it hit that number in July. And so then I told my agent and she was like, okay, great. Write me a pitch. I'll send it out. Like I should add, I always just forget that there are like parts that people don't know about. So I did get an agent in between the Atlas 6 going viral, or in between the Atlas 6 being published and the Atlas 6 going viral. So in the time in between there, I wrote my young adult book, My Mechanical Romance. That's what got my agent. It's what got my first, like, you know, solidly midlist publishing deal. And I was like, okay, great. Like, I did it. I have brought in just enough to equate to like a part-time job. Great. Like, now we can have a baby, I guess. Like, because I, you know, in that world, in the world where I just had to worry about my young adult novel coming out and just had to write like one other young adult book, like, I was like, I can do it. Then the Atlas 6 went viral. And so at that point, I had my agent to negotiate for me and to as a point to reach publishers. I always bring this up because I know that there is a very predatory, like, secondary market out there for people who take advantage of aspiring writers or self-published writers. I want you to know that if a publisher ever approaches you, tell an agent. It's not the same as querying. You can just email any agent and be like, I need someone to represent me because a publisher has approached me. Never go into that negotiation without someone there, because yes, an agent will take 15%, but you will get more money and better rights that way. You do not want to just give away rights into perpetuity. Okay. Your work is valuable. Anyway, if a publisher wants you, it's because you already have value. Okay. That's how publishing works. They're not just discovering you. Okay. Anyway, sorry. I just have to.
Important to say though.
Yes. And like my agent just moments ago emailed me to tell me that, like, the thing is that for some reason, people impersonate me on the internet and try to like offer like writing courses or something, and it's just a scam, right? And it breaks my heart because, like, why are you doing this? Why?
It's so
like, why with me? Why are you using my face and identity to do this to people? I would never do this. Like, anyway,
and then when you do come out with your writing course, you have to be like, oh no, I promise it is me.
No, I will tell you something. I will never come out with a writing course. So if anyone offers you, if anyone tries to tell you that I know what I'm doing, they are a fraud. Okay. So, like, I would never do that. The truth is, I don't know how to write a book. It just happens by sheer force of will every time. But yeah, so she sent it out. It went viral. All of this is a very long way of saying that my career exploded over the course of the same 4 months when I could not stand for longer than 20 minutes at a time, right? I have no memory of what this felt like. I'm not confident that I felt anything except for like pelvic floor pain. So, you know, like, my son was a terrible sleeper. Like, I don't remember the things. Okay. When the Atlas 6 like first got optioned by Amazon, which was a huge process, and now it's with Sony. That's a long story, just in case anyone was wondering. It's with Sony now. But when it was with Amazon, the only thing I remember from that announcement is that I had broken out in these horrific hives because I'm really allergic to a type of grass that I didn't know I was sitting in. And like, and because it like in order for nursing hormones are histamines, and for allergic reactions, you need antihistamines, which means that to get rid of the hives, I needed to stop nursing. but my son was only, 5 or 6 months old. He would not take a bottle. I could not feed him anything else. He would not take formula. So for the whole 9 hours, 12 hours that I wasn't allowed to nurse him because of a shot that I'd gotten for the hives, he did not eat that entire time. And so he just cried that entire day. I couldn't tell you shit about what that Amazon thing felt like. I only know the hives. So yeah, it's magical. I think it also, because of how quickly it happened, I feel a lot of fear about what happens if it goes away, because I don't know what made it happen. I think you anticipate, you think that a career is going to be something you work toward for a long time, that you sweat for, that you claw for.
Yeah.
And certainly I would have done that forever if someone had given me that amount of time.
Yeah.
But I just sort of shot up as a sensation. It overnight went from no one had ever heard of me to me being very overrated. And and I think that experience is impossible to contend with. I think there's a lot about people who go viral too, or the weird little micro fames, or Chaperone and I are not that similar, but in the sense that you go from being no one to someone overnight, that there's a lot of love, but there's also a lot of hate and confusion and how did this happen? And everyone's like, how do you feel? It's I don't know.
Everyone has a thing to say because everyone's hurt.
Yes. I think that the human brain is not built for the virality of the world that we live in. So
no. Especially not when you're the center of that virality as well.
Yeah.
It's one thing from the outside looking in, but I imagine from being the center of it, it's completely different story. Yeah, I still just I still can't wrap my head around how it happens to anyone. But because you see it in everything, don't you? You see oh, this video got 50 million views, and you're like, where were 50 million people last night?
I really think that we have completely lost the concept of scale. I feel this all the time, that I'll look at something and it'll be oh, 2,000 likes, and I'll be oh, only 2,000. I don't know 2,000 people. I don't know 200 people. No. I can't name 20 people. If I walked up to 10 people with a picture of myself and said, do you like this? I don't think they would like it. So what am I looking for? I don't know.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's numbers have no meaning anymore.
No.
So strange. It's so strange. It's just so bizarre. I feel like social media has wrecked everyone. It's both such a blessing and a curse to the wider population. But yeah, we've got some viewer questions.
Okay, great. Let's hear them.
How did you decide on your pen name?
Well, when I was writing fan fiction and I needed to create a username, I went to a name generator and it gave me Olivie Blake.
I just wanted to also mention, I didn't know if you were going to bring it up, so I didn't want to bring it up for you. The fact that your fan fiction is on Goodreads is so...
I wish it were not on Goodreads. Leave it on AO3 where it belongs. What? I don't need the thing that I wrote for free out of the love of my heart to be rated by strangers on Goodreads. That's not what this is for.
I saw it.
Fine, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't even know you could put fan fiction on Goodreads, but
you're not supposed to. Goodreads is a lawless place, man. Yeah. I used to go through and try to remove them, to just be this doesn't belong here. This does not belong here. But people would just put it back. Why? But I am very open about having written fan fiction. I do not engage with that source material anymore. No. But I'm not ashamed of what I've written. I think that a lot of it is pretty good, actually. So you know, and if you don't know where to start, you can read Divination for Skeptics for free on AO3 or fanfiction.net if you're really, really retro.
I feel, where did fanfiction.net go? I feel like it was the buzz for so long and then it just has disappeared.
It didn't have the capabilities of AO3. AO3 is just a better host. And fanfiction.net had a terrible search function, and you
Yeah.
could not really identify that many tags. I think
No.
the tagging, like the idea of addressing triggers and pairings and all of that stuff comes from AO3, and good. AO3 is an archive, and it's a very it's a library, and it has specifications and a system, and fanfiction.net was chaos. So even though I always preferred the layout of fanfiction.net.
They look cleaner.
It was clean, yes. The simplicity of the user experience.
I feel like the red theming of AO3 was just very overwhelming.
I don't like the font as much. I don't,
No, but the little pictures for the tags are nice.
Yes. Yeah. Every now and then people will read something and they'll be like, I think you should add this tag. Like, girl, move on.
I think I wrote something when I was 14 and people are like, when are you posting chapter 2? I'm like, I'm not.
Oh my God.
This was so long ago. This is like 11, 12 years ago.
Fortunately, all of my works are completed. I think like compulsively, I could not have left a work in progress.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't have been able to do it. I would even say that some of the works are shoddily finished because I finished them.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? They're done.
Exactly. It's more than a lot of people, because more than I can say. I've been on chapter 1 for 12 years.
I have faith in you. You could come back and finish.
So let's see. Who knows? Overnight sensation.
Yeah. What now is the time for it. When I was writing fan fiction, they were not just giving out book deals. Now they are. So just do it.
And they're marketing them as it as well. And I'm like, that's a bold move. That is
right.
Interesting. It could
Listen,
go other ways.
Publishing has understood that there's money to be made. It took them a while, but they finally gave in. And there's good and bad.
It happened with 50 Shades, but they like to steer away from that. But now they're fully embracing it, and I'm watching quite closely because I'm really intrigued to see which way it goes. Yeah. Is the new book going to be closer to fantasy or romance?
The new book. Which one?
One in the styler. I think this was when we were
so I am purposely, I mean, it is certainly again, I don't consider Alone with You in the Ether a romance. Mm-hmm. So this book will be romantic. It will be about a romantic relationship. I am also, it came from a concept that I'd already had, that I no longer think I can execute as I had written it before. I'm going to have to redo it. And I think that there will be a speculative element that has to do with time, because I'm aware this time that it will be published by Tor. And one of the complaints before was that like this is not a fantasy novel, and it's a Tor novel. And so should there be, so there is a speculative element now, even though I still think Alone with You in the Ether is kind of speculative. But yes, as it is currently being written, it is sort of about the uncertainty of both love and creative careers, the uncertainty of art. And so one of the characters is living their life out of order. But I am not ready to commit to that as a synopsis, as a pitch.
We're figuring it out.
Yeah.
The way you portrayed Regan's declining mental health really resonated with me, and so many people over the internet say the same. Do you think the publishers who declined the book are out of touch in a society where more and more people are vocal about mental health and neurodiversity?
Do I think publishers are out of touch? Yes. But what's amazing is that they're much more in touch than the film industry. So it is impossible. It is impossible to talk about publishing being sort of backwards in terms of recognizing who their readership is and how diverse their readership is. Like just in every sense of what, not only what people are willing to consume, but like also what kind of appetites various readers have. Like just really things that they are coming closer to being aware of those things. I think because of publishing's presence on TikTok and on social media, and the awareness that like that is one way to reach the reader directly. You can actually see the readers' faces because of Book Talk and various bookish communities. Whereas the film industry is just like it is a mystery to them, and they are so like guarded with their money. It's crazy. Like So, but publishing still is stodgy. You know, it's still like, it took a really, really long time to sell the book 12th Night, which is my second young adult book, because publishers did not believe that people who play RPGs read, which is crazy.
Interesting.
Insane take by publishing.
Yeah, a huge base for readers.
Huge overlap between like fantasy readers and D&D and MMORPGs. They just really did not believe that there was an overlap between gaming and reading. And
especially when it's also like you've got people like Critical Role who are publishing books now as well.
Yeah,
it's clearly it's so interesting.
So publishing also like I also recently got asked to edit a dark academia anthology, and I asked the person like, why now? Because I would say that, like, you know, the peak of dark academia was like a couple years in the rear view, and they're like, well, but publishing won't believe that it's a real thing until now. And I was like they don't know that they're in it, that we're in it, until it's everywhere. So yeah, it's a real like catch up game. And you know, and publishing is slow. And anyway, so I don't, you know, it's hard to talk about like what could have happened, whether someone would have still connected to it. Someone could, but that is the problem with traditional publishing, is you have to go through the gatekeepers. So if the gatekeeper does not relate to it, if the agent does not feel it speaks to them, and there is nothing else on the market to show that it could be successful, that's a no, because everyone wants to make money, right? That's the world that we're in. The system that we're trapped in is, if you cannot identify where the profit margin is, they're not going to publish it. So yeah. And, you know, honestly, I don't view anything that I did in Alone with You in the Ether as risky. I was not worried about portraying mental illness correctly. I was just portraying it in a way that felt true and honest to me. And so I think that's why, you know, people disagree, people, whatever. It is more amazing that it does speak to people, because that was not really the point. You know, I wasn't. I'm glad that it does. It was certainly that I looked around at the media I was consuming and felt that I did not like the way that mental illness was being addressed. Like, You're the Worst, the TV show, is very good. But when they started talking about clinical depression, I was like, this does not ring true for me. This feels like it's being dramatized to work with this plot. What's the other one? The one where Anne Hathaway has bipolar. And it was beautifully, it was part of it was Amazon, I think, and it was like an anthology, Modern Love, maybe. But it was beautifully shot. Like, I think that's a good example of how you can use cinematography to show something. But I also felt like unsatisfied with the way it was portrayed. There was, what else was big at the time that actually, I think it was, the one with Elle Fanning. It's a young adult novel. It was on Netflix, and the male lead has bipolar, and he kills himself in the end. And you know, that does happen. And you know, the type of bipolar that I have, I think the statistic is that 50% of people with my diagnosis will attempt suicide at least once in their lives. And so it's certainly something to address, but I felt that I had not seen it was what I said earlier, that I've only ever seen mental illness approached as, this is the trauma, and here's the trauma of everyone else around them who's trying to deal with, you know, the trauma that they have brought. And then the sort of like not very true to the darkness of it. So there was not a good representation of the range. Because I do think that people with mood disorders, people who are neurodivergent, I have such a hard time with that word, neurodivergent, is that those people are freaking geniuses at something. You know, like, there's something that those people are incredible at in a way that is superhuman almost, because it kind of is. Like, and so, and I think that a lot of times there is this hesitancy to glamorize those things. You don't want to be like, every bipolar person is a genius.
No.
but you also don't want to be every bipolar person is destined for pain. Like, so I think there was for me, I wanted to broaden the spectrum of what was available. That was just like, okay, I have not seen a story about, look at what my mood disorder has brought to my life. Look at the kind of person it has made me, which is, when you see the way that Aldo sees Regan, or the way that Regan sees Aldo, that's when you're seeing, this is what this illness has made me. And it is not, it's not ugly. And so I think that was what I was trying to do for myself, was just like, I am not seeing someone who feels like me. So I'm going to write someone who feels like me, and we'll see if other people agree. And I think that, like, Aldo, like, I am not Regan, because Aldo also has elements of, and I just sort of, I took myself and I split myself in two and was like, and you have these problems and you have these problems. So they are both very, like, real to me in that way. I don't like it when people call things the book of their heart, because I think that, like, your body of work is ongoing, and there's no such thing. So I'm not going to call this that. And I never want people to feel like none of this is a self-insert. All of this is me, like, processing the feelings that I went through and creating story out of it. So
yeah, lovely. No, I think especially with television and film, you see it in kind of everything that's done. Even when you watch, like, kids shows now, and the slang they use, and it's just so out of touch with what's actually going on. And I think if they can't even get that, then how are they going to handle, like, heavy topics?
I will tell you, though, I find writing contemporary young adult to be substantially harder than anything else, because I don't know what these kids are doing. I don't know I don't know how they're talking to each other. Like, I don't know anymore.
They're on the TikTok and
like, I don't even know one thing I don't understand about TikTok, because I don't have it, and I sense that it would be dangerous for my brain. So I will not get it. Is that, like, it's not like when I was a kid, we had MySpace, and the only job of MySpace was, like, to engage your friends. Like, you didn't befriend other people on the internet. You weren't looking for, like, you were looking for the actual people in your real life. Same with Facebook. That's just like, you're just engaging with your friends and family and people you know. But that's, like, the opposite of what TikTok is. Like, the point of TikTok is not to engage with anyone that you know.
Yeah, it's really, like, if anyone saw your video that you did know, you'd be mortified. But you're okay with, like, strangers seeing it. I mean,
there's this very strange impersonal quality to TikTok, and so I'm like, well, I don't know how this is used in the context of a young person's life. Like,
I went to a family wedding the other day, and my cousin, she's just turned 17. She got my dad involved in a TikTok. My dad, who won't even touch Facebook because he's too scared for people to see him and he'll click the wrong button. But he's completely happy with just the fact that this could go viral.
Sure. Yeah, because all those people are fake, right? What's 2,000 people? What's 200,000 people? What does that mean? I don't know.
Yeah. They're not real. They're just numbers.
Exactly.
I wanted to go into, like, your magic systems and what you've done, because I feel like they are so, while obviously it is magic, they're also quite grounded in terms of how they're explained and how magic exists in the world. And I feel like that kind of resonates throughout quite a lot of your books. How did you find building a magic system? I feel like that is a very difficult thing to do.
Yes. People often ask me, like, how do you know that you've done enough world building? And, like, there is, you don't know, right? Like, there is no, there's, it's about taste, because books are a form of art. There is no objective answer to that question. You just have to determine, like, how much world building do you like? How much world building do you need in order for your story to be understood by another person? And I always like to bring this up, because they seriously, they always throw me on world building panels, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, probably half the people in the audience would say that they don't understand my world. Like, who knows? because I'm the kind of person that, like, if you tell me too much about the world, I'm out. I'm not committing that to memory. It's not happening. So I specifically can't read like space operas, because I'm like, just do not describe this ship to me, please. I'm begging you, don't.
Like whenever I start reading them, it gets to a point where they're describing like the interface, and I do just blank out.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so that button does this, and that's about all I know.
Right. So there are some people who are like, you just need to know how something works, right? But then there are lots of other people who are like, no, I want to know exactly. Like, I want to know what all the buttons on the spaceship do. And I think that's great. But it just depends in terms of how this is applicable to other people's writing. I think that you just want to read like a writer, like read a book, you love it, say you love it, right? And you're like, I love this magic system. Ask yourself, how did it work? And then like kind of work backwards from there. Like one of my favorite fantasy series is the Shades of Magic series by V. Schwab. And that's when, like, I think that's the extent of world building is like just enough.
Yeah.
I don't need to know any more than this.
Yeah, exactly.
And, but that being said, the Atlas 6, my husband had just started teaching at that point. He had just started teaching physics, and he was having a problem where he was realizing that the girls in his class would just often give up on themselves. Like, they would just be like, I don't understand it. I'm an English and history girly, you know, like I don't do science. And he was like, and it was very frustrating to him, I think, because in his heart, he's just a lovely, soft person, and wanted the girls to feel just as capable and just as, like, I think he wanted them to have that same sort of like creative drive that he saw in the other elements of their academics, where he was like, well, if you can do that, you can do this easy, no problem. And so he was like, I would love for you to bring girls into science, or to write something that makes girls feel like science is relevant to them. And so I tried this 2 ways. I wrote My Mechanical Romance, which is for young girls, which is for teenage girls. And the idea was, I'm going to make science romantic, that you can find your Prince Charming in your robotics club. And he's just as hot as the quarterback, you know? And then with the Atlas 6, I was like, I'm going to make science sexy. I'm going to make the mysteries of the universe feel centrally charged, you know? And so one of my goals with the Atlas series was, I wanted all the magic scenes to feel romantic, and all the sex scenes to be about power.
Yeah.
So I started with, the way that I research is kind of like, I'm a very easily bored person. So instead of deciding like what I want to write and then researching how to write it, or what, you know, I start with what is interesting to me. What do I like, and what can I like process cerebrally for however long it takes to actually write this whole story. And so I started reading a bunch of physics related books. My husband is very into mechanics. He has no interest in theoretical physics, but I do. I think that quantum theory is very, very interesting. I think that there is a huge overlap between people who love the classics and theoretical physics, because basically every philosopher ever has wondered, how does the universe work? Yeah. And so there is something that is inherently quite romantic about that sort of sense of wonder. It lends itself very well also to the themes of existentialism, which is what I was trying to do with the Atlas series. So how did I build that into a magic system? I don't know. I was like, okay, quantum theory is magic. Yay! No further questions. And I do think that what is most important is that you understand the systems of the world, that you understand, like, also the sweat of it. What are the limitations? How much, at what point? There's always a cost, right? And one thing that I like to use as an example is Raina, who in the Atlas series can talk to plants, and she sort of accesses this naturalism power, is very similar to Isabella from Encanto.
Yes.
and they both have limitations, right? Reina's limitations are her own. They're the limitations of her body. Isabella's limitations are her family. If her family is not doing well, she cannot perform her magic. So as long as you understand that, like, that's how that's where the rules fall, that's as much as you need to know.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think it's the kind of, enough is given that it is so intriguing and so interesting, but also, again, we're going back to like the space opera conversation, you're not overwhelmed and you don't check out. But you want to pry into it more, and you're like, oh, maybe it does this because of this, and it's like, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
there's
sure.
certainly lots of things like with the Atlas series that I did think, like, there are, you know, mechanisms built in that if you want to ask how this works, the answer is in the book somewhere.
Yes.
Gifted and Talented, that's less true. Gifted and Talented was more of like this is a fantasy in that, like, you are just going to ponder this. How is this possible? I don't know. It's magic. Who out here can explain? If you can explain the magic, is it still magic? I don't know.
Yeah, the passage where it's like, yeah, magic exists. I was like, it's like magic exists in the way that you think you know magic, but also in the way that businesses know magic. And we try and pretend that real magic doesn't exist and blah blah blah. If people watching, if you haven't read Gifted and Talented yet, you should, because it was incredible. I couldn't put it down.
Thank you.
It was genuinely, I feel like, especially with fantasy when it is set in such a familiar world, you just want to know so much more. And I think I'm really intrigued to know where the inspiration came from for it, if there was one.
Well, my editor, when I had sorry, my computer has this weird thing. It keeps popping up with a thing I have to close out of. My editor, after I had finished the Atlas Complex, was like, have you considered writing a family drama? And I was like, you don't think I've written a family drama? In my head, not only is the Atlas 6 a family drama, it's a family drama and also a 6-person love story. But One for My Enemy is definitely a generational family drama. And I was like, well, okay, hold my beer. Like, I'll do it again. And in this case, when I was sort of pondering what would feel like a family drama, I leaned on something I really love, which is the film The Royal Tenenbaums. That's actually why the font is what it is, because it's patterned off a Wes Anderson film poster. Yes. So I love The Royal Tenenbaums. I think that all of Wes Anderson's work is so interesting because it has such an aesthetic. Like, you really it's buying into what I consider the cinematography equivalent of voice. Wes Anderson has a very clear voice. And that's what I wanted to do with Gifted and Talented as well, that I was going to put on a voice. And that was going to be the main drive of the story. And it was going to be about 3 siblings who were very, very promising. And also an outsider who wants to belong. And I think I wanted to, in some level, it is more of a family dramedy. It's more of a Black comedy than a true drama. And it is about grief, but not just grieving the relationship you didn't have with your father, or grieving the love you didn't have, but also grieving the person you thought you'd be. And sort of coming to terms with the future you imagined for yourself versus the reality of who you are, which is kind of what I think your late 20s and early 30s are. It's just like, it's like your teen years are about becoming like everyone else for the sake of safety. And then in your 20s, you kind of rediscover the things that you actually like. But you also rediscover the flaws that you can't actually fix, or like unfortunately, you come face to face with the person you are and all the limitations therein. And I think that crossing from the mid-late 20s to the 30s, generally speaking, but I also find that I'm very comfortable in my mid-30s. Like, that there's this, that's the acceptance part. That's the, okay, I understand who I'm not, and I am understanding better who I am. Someone once told me that when you turn 30, you start to see these doors open for you, and you have the maturity to understand which ones are yours. And that was definitely true for me. There was a lot less wondering, generally speaking. And so I wanted to talk about how that's sad. That like, of course, the grief, you're grieving the person you wanted to be, the life you wanted to have, the relationship with your father that you thought you'd have the time for, that you don't, because you don't get to control that. And but then you also get to accept who you actually are, what it actually means to do good in a world that does not reward you for good. So it's another existential story. But it's intended to have more of a sense of absurd, I think, because of the feeling that like life is long enough to live it well, but it's also so short that you don't actually get to see that come together. Like you don't get to see yourself as a story that has a beginning, middle, and end. And so sort of that theater of absurd there, of just like, well, how do we go? We're just all going through this, like no one knows what they're doing, and we're all being so stupid about it. That's the concept behind Gifted and Talented.
When you like have such a large cast of characters, and I feel like they're all so well-rounded as well, and like all their storylines interlink into a way to like create the bigger picture, and you kind of figure out things through dribs and drabs of other people's perspectives. How hard is that to keep track of?
For me, this is the area where the bipolar is helpful, because I'm just like good at this. My brain can keep track of all of the characters. I'm not very methodical. I don't have like a notes file for everyone. I just like know who they are. But I think that I'm going to answer kind of a different question. I looked over the questions that you sent me, and only one of them stuck out to me because it was one that I actually had a quick answer to, which is that how did I go from the narrative scenes to the scenes that were written as a play? That one is very quick and almost as if I know how to write, because there were so many characters present that it was much easier to just identify them. Like, here's who is in the room and here's who's speaking. That was just a very quick way of handling something that could have gotten very like unwieldy very quickly. But I do think of Gifted and Talented as the Olivie Blakest of the Olivie Blake books, with the second Olivie Blakest book being Masters of Death, because you do have to just like go with it. Like I basically am like, take my hand, come with me. Do you know where we no, just come with me, right? And there's a large cast and there's a lot going on, and you will not understand the purpose of everything until you get to the end. And ideally, you'll stand at the end, look at the shape of everything and be like, aha, of course. That might not happen, but that's but I think if you go into it in good faith, that's the feeling we land on.
I feel like as well, it's so helped having, I mean, I don't know how much of a spoiler it is. I don't actually want to say it. The character who is the narrator.
Oh yes, God.
With God, and God kind of being explored throughout the book, more so. I think having the passages of script and like screenplay element really felt natural for that character, for God to talk about the scene unfolding.
Yes,
I thought that was really interesting, and I just loved the little like the very short chapters where God would say something and just be like, oh, by the way. I was like, fave, love it. Do you have a favorite character from this cast?
From Gifted and Talented? I try very hard not to have favorites, because I think that it's detrimental to the work, because I think that when the author has a favorite, the audience can feel it. Like I've definitely read books where I'm like, yes, the author's fave has returned.
All of the good things are happening to this one character.
Or it's just like there's something where like the writing comes alive again because the favorite character has re-entered the story. But it was very hard because every day, this is another situation where I had to write it over the summer because my husband is a teacher, so that's when he could watch my son. Like he could take over the main caretaker duties during the summer. So it was like, I have 6 weeks. That's it to write this book. And so every day I have to go in and I have to write something. What is it going to be? I don't know. And so But all the days that I would sit down and realize, it's a Meredith and Jamie day, those would fly. Like just I would hit my word count in like, I don't know, I was writing at least 2,500 words an hour whenever it was them. And so it was very hard to like be like, okay, you have to, all right, what about the others?
I love the other couples.
You know, and I could sit here for a long time and think about, like, because I also, you know, I love the dynamic with Arthur and Jillian. I love like Arthur's whole situation was very like entertaining to me. Ailey was such a mess. Like she was so great. I like to point out that Ailey's name is Ailey because I was in the UK and I'm starting to run out of character names. Like my name generator has started giving me all the same names and I've used them already. And so I was signing books and I was like, oh, I don't know how to pronounce this. How do you pronounce it? And they're like, oh, it's Ailey. And I was like, okay. And then there was another Ailey and I was like, if there's a third Ailey, I'm going to have to name a character this. And then there was, so that's it.
Amazing.
So yeah, that's my story there because everyone is like, what is this name?
See, because my family are all Irish, so we're all very funny. I read it and I was like, oh, it's so nice to see a familiar name on the paper.
Yeah.
But I think it is one of those that, I mean, I have exactly the same thing with my name. It's just a bunch of letters that are pushed together and make no coherent sense. But yeah, I felt very pleased to read Ailey on the page and I was like, I know you. Don't worry, I can pronounce you.
It used to be that the first time you saw the name Ailey was when Meredith was giving Ailey as her fake name and she says it's Ailey and the person says Haley to like inform the reader. Yeah. But then that got pushed and I was like, whatever. You know what? They can look it up. That's the thing. I had to look up Hermione. So
exactly. There's so many names out there that then just I feel like I do find some companionship in names that are impossible to read though. I love it. If there needs to be, you know, like the name pronunciation guides at the back of a book, if there's one of those, instantly in love. I want to not be able to know how to say it. I need to read it. But then you've got the audiobooks and the audiobooks.
Yes, yeah. Now there's audiobooks, so.
Yeah, it's all good. It's fine. When you write a book, does the plot tend to evolve naturally? Or do you tend to plan a lot of it beforehand?
Yeah, I would not call plot one of my strengths or priorities. Do I think all of my books have a plot? Yes. But I think more important than plot is stakes. And so I am a lot more interested in relationship arcs and character arcs and how does a person change throughout the book? How does their mindset change? I happen to be sort of an introspective person, I guess. So a lot of my books tend to be very introspective. And overall, I just do things because they're funny. That happens to me a lot. Like with the Atlas 6, I was like, wouldn't it be funny if there was a character who could hear nature speak and she just found it so annoying? And, you know, so a lot of times when I write something, it's just like, wouldn't it be funny if this thing happened? And because I am very easily bored, I am a pantser. I don't like to know too much of the story going in because then how can I possibly sit down and work on it? You know, like once I know an ending, it's like, well, I can't sit here anymore. Like, so for me, the plot is sort of incidental. A lot of times a pitch for me will be like, here's the inciting incident. Here's where I want to land emotionally. So like the ending of the Atlas series, I knew would end cathartically versus the end of Masters of Death was like sort of joyfully with a very fan fiction ending of like everybody's in love. Happily ever after. And Alone with You in the Ether I always knew was going to end with the feeling of life going on. One of my favorite things is V.U. Schwab said that when you finish a book, she likes to imagine that like you close the door on the house where the characters are living and you leave, but the characters continue. And that was certainly that was the feeling I wanted at the end of Alone with You in the Ether. That's like, we don't actually know what's going to happen. So on the one hand, you don't get the romance ending of Marriage and Babies because I didn't feel that was right for them. They weren't in the right stage of life to be contemplating those things. And I also didn't want to take away from the fact that if they do break up, if they get married and they divorce acrimoniously, if they, you know, whatever, if whatever happens to them, that does not cheapen in any way the story that I just told you, you know? So I think I wanted to have that feeling that like, I obviously don't think that that happens to them, in case anyone was wondering. I think that those two crazy kids work things out. But I wanted the sense that like, we have now walked away from this relationship that is so meaningful, and nothing can ever take away from that. It doesn't matter. Happy ending, sad ending, it doesn't matter, because they had this.
Yeah, I love that. We've got a couple viewer questions left.
Yes.
Do you ever feel like you need to hold back when writing the ugly side of mental illness and its symptoms? I find that a lot of authors, I can speak, I promise. I find that a lot of authors fear this, but you lean towards being transparent, which must be scary.
I don't, because it's happening to me. I don't really know what other people think is scary or not. I think that a lot of times there's this expectations that writers write with a certain audience in mind. In this case, like a neurotypical or like, you know, healthy audience. But I don't know what their lives are like. I can't relate. So
I don't relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, if you asked me like what in that book is like bad or dangerous or unhealthy, I don't really know. Like they're not things that I did on purpose. So it's more of I don't think that I actually am capable of holding back, because I don't really know where that line is. I think that the effort to be authentic it just means that like I can't suddenly start lying to you. I wouldn't be able to write it.
Yeah, I think that's so fair. I think there's like something about writing something that is so close to you and being so honest and open about it. It does in one sense feel like that is the only way to do it, to be so transparent, because otherwise it's, I don't know, is it I don't actually know what I'm trying
Well, then
to
it's like, what are we doing, right? Like what is the point of telling you a story that doesn't feel real? Because if I don't think it feels real, then you certainly won't. Like, I do think that there is an element of like communion between the reader and the writer, that there is no such thing as just the writer's interpretation or just the reader's interpretation. There is this feeling of like, where I have come up to meet you. And so if I am bringing you some bullshit, I don't think you're going to like it, you know? Like, I just, you know, what are we even here for? So I guess
think when you sit
but
down,
there is, I will say there is, I think, a fearlessness in that I now know that a lot of people have criticism of Alone with You in the Ether, and I would not have known that at the time of writing. Like, I wouldn't have guessed, because I don't see things the way that the haters see things.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's something about sitting down to write a book about mental illness and not diving into mental illness that would feel ingenuine. Is that the word? Is it disingenuine or ingenuine? I can never remember. One of the two.
Disingenuous.
Yeah, sure, that one. And then finally, where do you usually find yourself writing? Indoor, outdoor, at a desk, a sofa, in a clean or messy room, etc.?
I can write anywhere as long as my back is not to an access point. I have a sort of atavistic fear of being stabbed, I guess. Like, I don't feel that I can be safe. Like, I have to be safe in the mind palace, right? Like, I have to be able to enter the fugue state. And so it doesn't matter where I am, as long as I know I'm not going to be interrupted for a significant period of time. And that I don't feel vulnerable in any way. Yeah, it's so that's why but I mean, I guess I don't like to write outside, just because I do only type, because I write quite fast, and I cannot handwrite 2,000 words an hour.
I don't know if anyone could. That sounds like it would be massive.
So yes, so I do. And I don't dictate either, because I think that would be really messy to work with a transcript of, like the going back and be like, no, wait, this, no. And like, no. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you use a specific software, or do you just use like Word?
I used to use Google Drive, and then Google did the thing where they're like maybe using it for AI, or they have a right to judge something pornography, which sometimes I do write that. So I stopped using Google. And with publishing, you have to use Microsoft Word. There's no way around it. So I've just been using that right now. I would not say it's like incredible.
Yeah.
It's not like the greatest experience I've ever had, but at least it saves me a step. I used to write the whole first draft in separate Google Docs. Like I would have like a folder of chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and then I would compile it all, put it in the Word doc, and then edit in there, because I do think that changing the font and the layout helps catch like errors. I do recommend, if you're proofreading, change the font, and then you'll catch things better. But yeah, no, there's nothing too special about my process. What's amazing is that it happens.
Yeah. I feel like that's such a handy tip that you wouldn't think of, though, just changing the font. But it would obviously give you a fresh set of eyes to look at. I've never.
When I was writing fan fiction, I would put it in the fanfiction.net editor first, and then I would read it on AO3, and then I'd go back and fix the errors.
I love that. The tips and tricks you learn, eh?
Yeah. No effort is ever wasted. You learn something from every medium.
Exactly. I feel like the cover art for all of your books is always stunning. It's always so beautiful. How much of a say do you have in what you want?
I have a good amount of say. I'm allowed to be very actively involved up to like 80%. And then they kind of take over from there. So I have a lot more. Again, I came in as someone who already had value to publishing. I had already sold a number that publishing sees as significant. So I was able to throw my weight around a little bit. I don't take credit for a lot of things, but one of the things is definitely that I insisted on interior illustrations, and now a lot of books have interior illustrations, and I would like to think that I did that. But basically, I am through the process of when we do comps, which is like anywhere from 10 to 20 concepts, wildly different. Just a graphic designer. I usually work with Jamie Stafford Hill. He's my designer for most things, and they just like, it'll be just like ideas that he's thrown together. So it'll be like, try this color and try it with this font and do this concept and blah blah blah. Not final at all, just like, do you see the vision? And then I'll take like a few favorites from there, we'll refine it, and then it'll either be great, like Masters of Death, great. He sent me a comp that was almost exactly that. It was that with the color scheme and just a slightly different font. And I was like, can we pull the font from 1 and put it to 4, whatever. And boom, we had Masters of Death, and it was done, and it was great. And then other times, editorial or sales disagrees with us, and they're like, no, we're not doing that. Sometimes you can see, like Gifted and Talented, for example, is changing very drastically between the hardcover to the paperback, and that is a result of publishing, the sales probably feeling that we didn't reach the right audience. So there is a lot of effort that goes into covers, and a lot of it is like, I'd love to imagine sales as just like an oracle that like someone goes into the back room and is like, sales, what do you think? And sales responds. Like, I'm pretty sure that sales is like a spreadsheet. Like, it's not a person. Like there is a sales department, but in terms of like the sales decision of like how much something is worth, it comes down to like plugging in numbers. And so
crazy.
It's a mix of an organic and inorganic process of like this is what we think might work artistically, and here is what the data is telling us.
The changes from hardback to paperback sometimes can be so drastic, and I didn't realize that would be because of that, which is really interesting.
I know. I always thought, I don't know why I thought it was just like an opportunity to do another cover. But actually it's usually an indicator that something didn't sell well.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. And then I didn't realize the time. A little quick fire one.
Okay.
What is so there's what's your favorite book? Which is not a quick fire question. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it is for me.
Is it? Amazing. And then finally,
Yes.
what do you like to do the most when you're not writing?
Okay. My favorite, I'm going to give you 2 answers for my favorite books. Actually, technically 5. My favorite books are the Neapolitan novels by Elena Ferrante. But I also, one of the books I always go back to is I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. That's one that I think everybody should read. And it's about, they're both, those books are about writers. So, you know, maybe this was inevitable. And just incredible books. And when I'm not writing, I mean, I really quite enjoy motherhood, actually. That was not expected. I was not sure that I would. It took me a long time to decide I even wanted kids. And but I do quite enjoy spending time with my son, touching grass to that extent. I box for fun. I can only exercise if I'm working towards something. So I basically have spent the last few years training for an imaginary match. I did challenge Tomi Adeyemi to spar. We have not yet done it, so
just put it on a YouTube live stream. I'm sure it'll go down.
Yeah, she was like, "Do you think that our publishers will sponsor it and pay us millions of dollars each?" And I was like, "Yes, Tomi, I believe so."
Perfect. It could be like just Battle of the Bands, but it's just you two in a ring.
Yeah, I have not yet determined her height. My coach really wants to know. When I met her, she was wearing like really tall platform heels. So it remains mysterious, but we're traiing anyway.
We'll figure it out. Different classes, it's fine. You just have of some kind. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope your son has a wonderful birthday.
Thank you.
I hope your cake goes well. I'm sure you will.
God. Oh my God. The cake. I hope it's good. Okay.
It will be beautiful. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. And
thank you very much.
We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I keep saying it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone for the questions as well.
Of course. Well, see you later, and best of luck with everything, and best of luck with the book. I'm sure it will be fantastic as always.
Thank you.